from me says that it doesn't require or prohibit, so it's neutral. I will yield. First to the gentleman from Washington, but only briefly.
It'll be very brief. The Office of General Counsel of the Department of Defense says about the gentleman's amendment, if enacted, the attached provision would prohibit the Department from soliciting bids for FY13 funded construction contracts where, as a mandatory condition of award, the awardee must negotiate a project labor agreement with one or more labor organizations for the term of the resulting construction contract. That means they can't do it.
No, there's an important word there. Mandatory. It wouldn't allow the mandatory use. It's back to neutrality.
That's not what they think. They think that your language does what I think.
That's what you just read.
Well, that's not how they interpret it.
I'm not sure if they know what they're interpreting then. But the CRS, which looks at this, says it's neutral. So make no mistake. If you're
question on CRS,
what does it do then?
Did CRS actually speak to these agencies?
If they spoke to the agencies,
does the gentleman know if they spoke to the agencies? Did the gentleman speak to these agencies to see how they would interpret it?
We don't have to, because the agencies have issued guidance that we can look at where they have interpreted the President's executive order as to require the use of PLA.
Exactly.
That's why we offered the amendment.
And the amendment that you have in is going to be interpreted to preclude them from using PLA.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Well, what does it do then?
It simply takes the thumb off the scale that's there right now because these agencies have issued guidance. Now, you can say that the agencies may take this as thumb on the other side of the scale.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Nobody can control what they're doing, but this language simply makes it neutral.
Well done.
And that's what I'm trying to correct here. I yield back to Val.
Time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I hadn't planned on speaking on this amendment. There are plenty of other voices to do it, but I argued against this amendment in committee. I repeatedly argue against this amendment. I really don't know why we have to repeat this exercise other than it won by one vote the other time, and we're going to correct that mistake tonight, I will tell you. But the offer of the amendment is a wolf in sheep's clothing, in that the gentleman offering the amendment isn't in favor of project labor agreements. As a matter of fact, all the people who have spoken, are you in favor of project labor agreements? I don't want to slight you if you are.
No. Where they make sense,
where
they make sense, that's fine. Well, I just don't want a finger on the scale either way.
I hear you. And if that was true, the wording of your amendment...
On that point...
Well, okay.
Just briefly. The President doesn't require that they use a project labor agreement. He just suggests that they might be able to use it. That's pretty neutral.
Yeah. Well, let me say this. You know, I do agree with the gentleman from Arizona, which I very rarely do, that in fact under this administration there's sort of a feeling that we should have PLAs, which I happen to think is a good thing in my part of the world. However, this language is almost identical to the Bartlett Amendment that was in the defense authorization. To my belief, this was written by the Associated Builders and Contractors. And the Associated Builders and Contractors are not in favor of project labor agreements. Neither are most of the people, including Mr. Culberson. He's very proud of the fact that they don't have any unions in Texas. Well, we got them in Ohio. And I'll tell you, here's the difficulty with this and why this is a wolf in sheep's clothing. What the problem is if an agency determines that they want to proceed with a project labor agreement, this language prohibits them from doing it because it prohibits any contractor or subcontractor who may bid as a piece of that job to be required to enter into a union contract. And that's the difficulty, because if the agency, independent, without any thumbs on the scale, says, you know what, well, I got to tell you, CRS is wrong. CRS is flat out wrong. Great organization, they're flat out wrong. But what this does is say that if the agency, and let's just take one that's in the news here in Washington, D.C. So the Metropolitan Airport Authority that controls the three airports in this area decides they want to do a project labor agreement. The board votes that way to do a project labor agreement on the Silver Line, which is going out to Dulles Airlines, and it's covered by this bill. They cannot do a project labor agreement because this language isn't neutrality. This language says you can't have a project labor agreement because subcontractors can't be required to the terms and conditions that would be in a project labor agreement. So make no mistake about it, CRS notwithstanding, this is to kill project labor agreements, and if you have that position, that's a great position. You can have that position. Mr. Culberson, I believe, has that position. I do. He does. I know he does. We've talked about this. And you know what? He can have that position, but what you can't do is bring an amendment to the floor that pretends to do one thing and in fact does another. If you don't want project labor agreements to even be considered, vote against Mr. Grimm's amendment. If you think that they should be in the mix, you need to vote for it. Thank you. Oh, I'm happy to yield to my friend from Texas.
No, our point was that in right-to-work states where we have virtually no labor unions, we don't want contractors to be required to adopt prevailing wages or adopt union guidelines in order to bid on the contract. And in states like yours, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, you should be free to do so. And I think the way, truly, if I may, the way the amendment is written, we have obviously a difference of opinion, but it is written very clearly that the government cannot require or prohibit contractors from adopting these PLAs.
Well,
so it leaves it really up to the local VA to decide whether they're going to bid it out to a non-union shop or a union shop, depending on the state. In your states, fine. In Texas, you know, we're a non-union state.
Let me take back my time and say...
Thank you for the time.
Oh, well, my pleasure. Let me take back my time and say that I think it's unfortunate that Texas doesn't feel they have to pay living wages for construction jobs, but beyond that, let me say that if the language said that, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But the language doesn't say that. So let's say the VA down in Texas makes a determination that they want to do a project in Texas under a project labor agreement. They can't do it. They can't do it under this language. They are deprived of doing it because to have a project labor agreement would require, they would be forced to require the contractors and subcontractors to abide by the terms and conditions of that agreement. And I'm telling you, that's what it says, John, honest to gosh. And there's a better way to write this. This wasn't written by friends of PLAs, and it needs to be passed. Pass Grimm, Mr. Speaker.
If I may, with the gentleman yield, is there a way to write this? Is there a way to write this?
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. I'd ask unanimous consent for an additional 2 minutes so I can continue this riveting discussion with Mr. Culberson.
Thank you.
I'd yield to the gentleman from Texas.
Recognized for 2 additional minutes.
I think we're headed in the same place, that you'd like to preserve the ability to hire union contractors in Ohio, New York, and New Jersey.
Right.
And we share that. I have no objection under the 10th Amendment. If that's what you guys want to do, God bless you. So what I would ask is perhaps we could postpone consideration of this amendment briefly. Could you guys come up with some language to amend Mr. Flake's language to make it even clearer in your mind, so let New Jersey run New Jersey, and New York run New York, and Ohio run New York, and let Texans run Texas.
Well, we don't want Ohio to run New York. I think the gentleman misspoke.
Well, I want Ohio to run Ohio.
We got enough stuff going on.
Can you offer an amendment? Could you write, if I could, because you're a very capable legislator,
and you're a gifted orator,
may we postpone consideration of this amendment briefly so that you could amend his language to let Texans run Texas, and Arizona run Arizona, and Ohio run Ohio?
Well, a couple of things. One, I appreciate the gentleman's invitation, and I will do. I don't want to postpone consideration of the amendment.
We've got other work.
There's going to be a rolled vote. I assume you're not going to take this in real time.
No, we could fix this, though. Let's fix this.
There's going to be a rolled vote, and I will be happy to work with the gentleman, but we're going to stand on the Grimm amendment in case we can't come to some accommodation, which I hope we can, not written by the ABC. So I thank the chair for your
Gentleman from Ohio yields back. For purpose, the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. My own experience, before coming to Congress, I was actually an iron worker for about 18 years. I've actually run work on projects with PLAs. I've been a general foreman on large, complex construction projects, such as the ones that are covered by this bill. These large projects are $25 million and over, so it's not somebody throwing up a house here or there. I also worked in Louisiana where we had a PLA where half the job was union, half the job was non-union. And there are situations where PLAs are extremely important and extremely helpful. This bill would prohibit that from happening. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. LaTourette, is absolutely correct in his interpretation of the language in the bill. For instance, if the VA, which is right now considering building a spinal cord injury hospital in Brockton, Massachusetts, if they would like to put an agreement on that project that says we want 30% of the workers or 50% of the workers on this job to be veterans, United States veterans, they would not be able to put that language into effect because they would not be able to require a contractor to sign an agreement to hire veterans on a VA project. That's exactly what's wrong with the bill. Mr. Grimm has a very good amendment. It is on point. He is absolutely right. I know this from my own work on PLA projects. This amendment seeks to strike the provision from the underlying bill which would prevent any federal agency from requiring contractors to sign a project labor agreement. Now, PLAs have been highly efficient in coordinating many contractors on these complex construction projects, and despite the arguments of some, PLAs are not a guarantee of union employment. Under a PLA agreement, construction contractors can hire people regardless of union or non-union status, but what it does do, it requires that contractors abide by the law, and there's great scrutiny on these projects. They are required to properly classify their workers. As the gentleman from Texas pointed out, on some jobs where there otherwise might be immigrant workers, illegal immigrant workers on those projects, that doesn't happen on a PLA project because they've all got to be citizens. We have a helmets to hard hat program that's run by the building trades. They actually make sure that they're, especially our returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, that they get the first crack at those jobs. They bring helmets to hard hats from military right into those apprenticeship programs so that we train our young men and women coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq a skilled trade. The PLAs are most commonly used on large multi-year projects that are complex and that present considerable difficulty for contractors to bid those jobs. The key here is that under current law, federal agencies, the VA at the spinal cord injury hospital or the DOD if they're building a defense complex, they can use a PLA when appropriate. They can put an agreement together that makes sure that the workers, if you've got a plumber on the job, he's properly licensed. If you've got an electrician on the job, he's properly licensed. That they abide by a drug-free workplace program. They can put a lot of good things that make sure that that project comes in on budget and ahead of schedule. And what this would do would be to prevent the VA or the DOD from requiring that on a job. And it's the worst contractors that are afraid of this agreement, because they'd be required to comply with the law. They'd be required to have workers' comp. They'd be required to meet with the OSHA and safety regulations. The construction industry, I worked in it for 18 years, very dangerous industry, and sometimes it costs more to run a safe job. Look, PLAs are a good idea. We should continue, when appropriate, to allow these federal agencies to use them on these construction projects. They're a good idea. And they've been, up to now, they've been evenly administered, although this bill would change that dynamic. It would basically ban the VA from requiring that veterans be used on those projects, or the DOD from saying, look, we want to have veterans on this project, we want to have 50% of the workers on this project, we want to be veterans. It's entirely appropriate for the VA or the DOD to do that. They would be prohibited from doing that under the language of this bill. I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
For purpose, the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition.
Strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I let a train of thought go from my good friend from Arizona, I would like to yield 30 seconds of time.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I just want to say, first, the gentleman mentioned that he thought that this bill was written by the Associated Builders and Contractors. That is not the case. This issue was first brought to my attention after a meeting my office had with the Army Corps of Engineers. So a government agency brought it to our attention. Second, We're trying to bring back the same neutrality that existed during the Bush administration, before this president put the finger on the scale. During the Bush administration, during that 8 years where we had neutrality like this amendment of mine returns to, there were contracts awarded with project labor agreements. There were contracts awarded without them. That's what neutrality does. Where it makes sense to use a PLA, it's used. When it doesn't make sense, it isn't. It's neutrality. That's what this bill returns to. That's why this amendment should be rejected. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Arizona. I thank you for your amendment, and I supported that. I respectfully do not support the Grimm amendment. I'm from Michigan. Michigan takes no back seat in this country to union labor. It is the auto capital of the world, returning auto capital of the world. It's a proud union state and a lot of proud, solid union workforce in Michigan. Just this past summer, the state legislature, in majority, with the governor concurring and signing, signed into law a prohibition against a mandatory requirement of PLAs and government contracts. The state of Michigan, with their 10th Amendment responsibilities, did that. Now, unlike what took place with the past administration, as the gentleman from Arizona correctly pointed out, under the Bush administration, the federal appellate court ruled in favor of doing away with the mandate and leaving neutrality there. That's all the provision of this section 517 does, is simply restore the neutrality. That's all we're asking, that when PLAs make sense and ultimately bring about a better project and an outcome, fine. But when they don't, for whatever reason that is, there should be no mandate, and there ought to be the opportunity within these contracts, within a state like Michigan, to make a decision to not go with a PLA if that's the best outcome result. Again, this provision in the bill does not prohibit PLAs. It does not prohibit PLAs. It is neutrality. Studies have found that PLA mandates increase the cost of construction between 12% and 18% compared to non-PLA projects subject to prevailing wage laws. That's a decision-making process. That's a point that ought to be considered. It doesn't do away with PLAs, but it says it ought to be considered in the cost, and shouldn't taxpayers have that consideration? Shouldn't quality have that consideration? PLA mandates typically restrict jobs to construction workers referred from union hiring halls, effectively shutting out, in Michigan and other places, 86% of the nation's construction workforce. I don't think that's right. However, if it's necessary to have the union workforce with a PLA agreement and it'll work better and be more efficient, contrary to these studies, but if that's the case, then this provision in the Act does not do anything except allow neutrality. Mr. Speaker, that's what we're asking for, to continue what this Congress put in place by a vote last week in saying we believe that PLAs are good sometimes, may not be as good other times, and there ought to be neutrality and an opportunity for decision-making on the local level, at the state level, at the contract construction level that meets the best of the abilities. The federal agency should not mandate that contractors enter into project labor agreements as a condition of winning federal contracts. Again, we're looking at nearly $16 trillion in debt. And when our construction industry still suffers, and I can tell you that's the case in Michigan and in my district, from a 14.5% unemployment rate, we in Congress should not be tying the hands of taxpayers and construction workers by making requirements with a thumb on the scale of the President of the United States that really disregards the will and the opportunity of states like Michigan to make their own decisions here. I thank the Speaker for the opportunity, and I yield back.
Time's expired. For
Mr.
purposes,
Speaker?
the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition.
Yes, I move to strike the last word, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
First, I want to thank Mr. Grimm for offering this bipartisan amendment. Last year, we saw the same effort to attack project labor agreements in the Military Construction Appropriations Bill, and this House, on a bipartisan basis, made the right choice. We supported negotiated contract labor agreements. Why? It's the American way. It's the American way to respect the dignity of the individual. Yes, their lives, their liberty, and indeed their pursuit of happiness. In Northern Ohio, we've seen how important project labor agreements are. We use them to save lives, as skilled laborers perform extremely dangerous work that I would dare to say almost no one in this House is capable of performing. These workers are absolutely essential for, these agreements are absolutely essential for workplace safety, for ensuring quality construction, and protecting the lives and rights of those men and women who perform extremely difficult, sophisticated, and superhuman work on a regular basis. I'm reminded in Toledo, Ohio, we were replacing a major interstate lift bridge, the largest transportation project in Ohio history, over $400 million. Over several years, we knew we needed a project labor agreement to complete the job with as few accidents as possible, because we were replacing a lift bridge along one of the region's most important interstate highway systems adjoining 3 states. We insisted, I worked so hard, that there be a project labor agreement for the construction of this complex skyway bridge over the Maumee River, the largest river that flows into the Great Lakes. I didn't want it to be like Mackinac, with the names of all the dead workers who were responsible for building that bridge and whose names are left to history. And we hoped and worked so hard to try to limit the danger to those men and women. And we knew we needed a project labor agreement to write the rules of the road for that construction project. People were literally placing themselves, their lives, at great risk every single day. And if you don't believe me, you should have seen those talented individuals lofted hundreds of feet in the air, and then in bitterly freezing weather, trying to put the pieces together in the river, above the river, to construct this giant, the giant spires, physically creating the modern architectural wonder of the Glass City Skyway, named after the veterans of our country. And despite all the safety precautions, our community still lost lives in 2 separate tragedies that were avoidable. In the middle of February in 2004, one of the cranes collapsed, killing 4 workers and injuring 4 others. Why did they collapse? Because the company decided to cut corners and did a contest between which part of the roadbed would be built faster. And all the inspectors missed what was happening. 4 workers were killed. I went to every single funeral. I never want to have to do that again. I never want to have to try to comfort the families of the tragedy that happened. 3 years later, another man died when the platform he was working on collapsed. I know we would have lost more lives, but we shouldn't have even lost those lives. We would have lost more lives if there had not been a project labor agreement in place. I don't believe in neutrality. Some of my colleagues have talked about neutrality. Not when it comes to workers' lives. These workers were helping to build our country's future for the benefit of us all. They deserve a safe work environment, and they deserve to have their lives represented in a contract agreement. It's worth more than the concrete. It's worth more than the spires. It's worth more than the metal. They were crushed to death. Crushed to death. Thank God we had an agreement in place. It wasn't neutral. It defended them. It defended the workers whose lives were saved, because we knew we were a nation of laws and that their lives were worth everything to us. It's the American way. When we as a nation invest in our physical infrastructure, those that are actually building up our country deserve to have their lives protected through contract. Not just the cost of the concrete, but the value of their lives. Support project labor agreements support this amendment. I ask my colleagues to vote for the Grimm amendment. I yield back my remaining
Gentlelady's time has expired. For the purpose of the gentleman from Maryland, seek recognition.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This discussion is not about safety. It's not about making projects safe or making them more efficient. This is about politics. This is about an executive order the President put in place that takes jobs out of the 1st Congressional District of Maryland and other districts where there may not be union workforces. Mr. Chairman, the unemployment rate is high enough in the 1st Congressional District of Maryland. Mr. Chairman, no, I will not yield. The unemployment rate in the 1st Congressional District of Maryland, Lower Shore of Maryland, is higher than the national average. And we don't have union workers. So if some bureaucrat in Washington, because of a presidential executive order, says we have to have a project labor agreement on a project under this bill, under this appropriation, unemployed workers in my district aren't going to work on that project. And the hardworking taxpayers in my district, as the gentleman from Michigan has said, will be paying 12 to 18% more of their hard-earned tax dollars to pay for a project labor agreement in a district that they don't want, that some bureaucrat in Washington decided needed. Mr. Chairman, we can't afford that. This country can't afford it. We have a $1.3 trillion deficit. We have a debt that approached $50,000 per person in this United States. And we're debating tonight about whether just to be neutral about language about project labor agreements. The gentleman from Arizona is absolutely right. This is plain English reading. It just says that the bureaucrat procuring that contract can't require a project labor agreement. If someone wants to bid on it, they can bid union labor. They can bid all the union labor they want. It just says you can't require it as a condition of the contract. Mr. Chairman, we got sent here to do the right thing for our hard-working taxpayers back at home, those who want to have a job, who want to be involved in some of these federal contracts. And without this provision, if this amendment passes and this provision is struck from the underlying appropriations bill, the people in the 1st Congressional District, those unemployed workers, are not going to have the opportunity to work on those projects for the simple reason that they don't belong to a labor union. That's what will disqualify them. Not that they're unemployed, not that they don't want to work, not that they don't know all the safety rules, not that they can't do the job, not that they don't have a plumbing license or an electrician's license, because they all have to have that license to hold a job, and the opponents and the proponents of this amendment know that full well. It's only because they don't belong to a labor union. That's what this fight is all about. Mr. Chairman, I hesitate to rise to oppose the amendment from the gentleman from New York, but in the 1st Congressional District of Maryland, this hurts our unemployment situation. This hurts our hard-working taxpayers, and I rise to oppose the amendment because in districts around America, just like the 1st Congressional District of Maryland, this amendment doesn't do justice to those unemployed workers. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For the purpose, the gentleman from Washington seek recognition.
I move to strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
You know, let's get back to some facts here. Under the CRS report that was referenced earlier, the National Labor Relations Act, as we know, gives most private sector workers the right to join or form a labor union and to bargain collectively. A project labor agreement is a collective bargaining agreement that applies to a specific construction project and lasts only for the duration of that project. In February 2009, President Barack Obama signed an executive order that encourages federal agencies to consider requiring the use of project labor agreements on large-scale construction projects. the EO defines a large-scale project as one where the total cost to the federal government is $25 million or more. The order states that agencies are not required to use project labor agreements. Regulations implementing the executive order went into effect in May 2010. Now, if that isn't neutrality, what is neutrality? I think this is a big to-do about nothing. I mean, this amendment is not necessary. The President didn't mandate anybody to do anything. The agencies decide. Is it in the interest of the government to do this in a particular case? And this administration has not done hardly any project labor agreements, as far as my understanding of this is, at least with the Department of Defense. So, again, I don't quite understand why all of this concern, and especially when non-union contractors can be part of the agreement. They can bid, they can be part of the agreement, and as long as they will abide by the law, by the prevailing wage agreements and things of that nature. Now I will yield to the gentleman from Arizona because he always yields to me, and I yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. The reason it's needed, as I mentioned, is because some of the federal agencies have taken the President's language in the executive order to mean that they can require or should require PLAs. In certain instances...
There is no evidence of that.
Yes.
Tell me who's done project labor agreements?
There is, and in fact there was a project in St. Louis, I'll mention one specifically, that under the stimulus funds, frankly, that was a shovel-ready project. But then a non-union shop actually offered the low bid, but refused the contract because the language that the President issued, or the executive order, was taken to mean that they had to look for a PLA, that they should be encouraged to use to look for a PLA.
That's not what it says. That's not what the President's statement says.
But that's how it has been interpreted, and that's why we're saying let's make it clear that we can neither forbid nor deny.
Yeah, well,
that's why we need to move to neutrality.
I'll take back my time. The gentleman does that quite frequently, too. I just would point out that the Department of Defense thinks the gentleman from Arizona's language is prohibitive, that it doesn't give them any leeway, that they must not do a project labor agreement. How much time do I have left?
The gentleman has 90 seconds remaining.
How much?
90 seconds.
I would like to yield to the gentleman from New York, the author of the amendment, if he would like to make any further comments here.
Actually, I would, and I thank you for yielding. I think the point is we're both making each other's point, that you feel that the language of the President is somehow restricting non-union shops from bidding. And I firmly feel and strongly feel that the language in your amendment absolutely prohibits the use of PLAs. I think what we're both looking for is neutrality, but the language on either side is not working, so we need to come up with a way to make this neutral so that everyone can bid and no one is prohibited. But I think we're saying the same thing, and I think we're working towards that, and I am going to work with the chairman, but for now, my amendment is going to stand, and we're going to work as quickly, with haste, to see if we can come up with something that we all agree with.
The best and safest thing to do is to defeat the Flake amendment. That's kind of a standard, that's the surest way of protecting the executive order. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. For purpose, the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I want to first say a thank you to the gentleman from New York for his efforts on this amendment, and also that he's done this in a bipartisan way. Also want to thank President Obama for his executive order in doing this to encourage project labor agreements, not require them. I think they speak for themselves. My friends on both sides of the aisle have a responsibility to the American people to get both low-cost and high-quality in job-creating military construction projects. Project labor agreements have a proven track record to ensure that. We should come together to support the Grimm Amendment. We can help create fewer cost overruns, faster project completion, and a fair day's wage for an honest day's work for American workers. I support the Grimm Amendment that strikes the anti-PLA measures in the Military Construction Appropriations Bill. PLAs are simply rules of the road for workers and management on construction projects. We know they cut taxpayer spending, they save time, they save headaches, they create good local jobs and better quality and value. Why would we not want that? Very simply, unions prefer PLAs because they treat workers like human beings instead of investment capital. Some people here think unions are unacceptable. I think those people are wrong. And history shows unions have largely helped create America's middle class and workers' rights enjoyed by all Americans, whether they're a member of a union or not. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, if you want to help cut spending and improve efficiency, stand with American taxpayers and with American workers. Vote for the Grimm Amendment. Remove the anti-PLA language to fix this bill. Let's get it right. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. For purpose, the gentleman from Illinois, seek recognition. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the longer I listen to this debate, the more confusing it becomes. I remember a wise man telling me once that you can't get blood out of a turnip, that you can slice it, you can dice it, you can whip it, you can do everything, but it still ends up being turnip juice. I rise in strong support of Mr. Grimm's amendment. And I do so because there seems to be a tremendous lack of clarity. It's amazing how we can all read the same words but arrive at a different meaning. And we can read them over and over and over again. So it would seem to me that the best way to have clarity is to make absolutely certain that these agencies understand that, yes, they do in fact have the authority to say yea or nay, yes or no, to enter into project labor agreements. I'm a strong supporter of organized labor. Doesn't mean that I think labor unions are perfect. Oftentimes, many of the people in the community where I live feel that they cannot access labor unions, that they can't get in, that they can't get membership. Yet and still, I think that project labor agreements are the best way to get the quality and the assurance that we're getting the best bang for the buck. And so again, I reiterate my support for the Grimm Amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For purpose, the gentleman from Texas.
He asked for the yeas and nays.
The gentleman asked for the yeas and nays. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York will be postponed. For what purpose, the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, while I strongly support some of the programs supported by this funding bill, it contains a number of proposals that I believe are detrimental. Firstly, H.R. 5854 includes language that will amount to an unwarranted extension of the pay freeze that's currently in effect for federal employees. Specifically, Sections 129, 231, and 232 would freeze the pay for federal civilian employees across the Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs through FY 2013, even though these employees, like all federal employees government-wide, have already sacrificed their fair share when it comes to reducing the federal budget deficit. In this Congress alone, federal employees have given up over $75 billion towards deficit reduction efforts, God bless you, and to offset the cost of unemployment benefits for millions of other workers. Let us remember that our federal employees are in the second year of a two-year federal pay freeze that will save the federal government $5 billion by the end of fiscal year 2012 and an estimated $60 billion over the next 10 years. For the average middle-income federal employee, this will amount to a loss of approximately $47,000 in income over a 20-year period. That could go toward a child's education or a family's retirement security. Our federal employees have already done more than their part to achieve government cost savings, and in recognition of their dedication, President Obama recently proposed a modest pay raise of 0.5%, a 0.5% in 2013 for federal workers. This bill, however, rejects the President's funding request for a 0.5% for civilian employees at DOD and the VA and freezes their salaries for a third consecutive year, even though a 0.5% raise will still not adequately protect federal pay from being eroded by an inflation rate that is currently over 3%. So they're still going to get a pay cut, but it would have been a 2.5% pay cut instead of 3%. And we can't live with that. Mr. Speaker, this is yet another in a series of legislative attacks that have targeted middle-class workers in this Congress. It will further erode employee morale and diminish the federal government's ability to attract the best and brightest to carry out its work. I don't know if you read Roll Call or it was Politico today. They did a survey of job satisfaction among federal employees. And the VA, the docs who are doing great work, the nurses doing fantastic work, the therapists over there taking care. We all say we're really protective about our veterans. Well, these are the people that take care of our veterans every single day. They clean the bedpans, they do their therapy, they do their surgery, they watch out for them. And we were going to give them a 0.5% raise this year. And instead, what this bill does, it guts their pay. It cuts out that 0.5% that they would have gotten. These are the people that are taking care of our veterans. God bless them. A lot of them are veterans themselves. And these are DOD employees. We all say we're pro-militaries. These are people that are supporting our fighting men and women in Iraq and Afghanistan on a daily basis in a direct way. We were going to give them a 0.5% raise. But no. We're going to use this. We're going to cut their pay in order to have them help us balance the budget some more. They're already in a two-year pay freeze. Our dedicated civil servants play a vital role in many critical areas, especially in the work they do every day to support our military and our veterans. They should not continue to bear a disproportionate burden when it comes to addressing our nation's budget problems. I also want to express my strong opposition to Section 517, which again prohibits the use of project labor agreements, as we said before. There are a lot of disappointments in this bill. I can't believe we're going after VA workers. I cannot believe that we're going after VA workers in this bill or against Defense Department workers in this bill. I think they do a lot for this country. They do a lot for the most vulnerable, especially at the VA. They do heroic work there. I have 3 VA hospitals in my district. I'm blessed. At the Brockton Hospital, they're doing tremendous work there with a lot of our World War II veterans who, for the first time in their lives, they have to rely on the VA. And these are the people that are doing that job, Mr. Speaker. They're doing a tremendous job. They're already working at less wages than they could get at a private hospital. But because they love our veterans and believe in it, they stay there at the VA out of the goodness of their heart. And now we've got them in a 2-year pay freeze. The President was trying to give them a 0.5% raise, increase in cost of living, I'd say. And they're being denied even that. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. This is the gentlelady from California seek recognition.
Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment. Clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Beer of California, page 66, after line 4, insert the following. Section A, Section 107 of Title 38 United States Code is amended. 1, in subsection A, by striking not after Army of the United States shall.
For what purpose? The gentleman from Texas seek recognition. Without objection, so ordered.
If I may,
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentlewoman's amendment.
The point of order is reserved. The lady from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, our nation is great because in times of trial, when we do the wrong thing, we will come back and do the right thing. What this amendment does is attempt to address a wrong that we did many years ago and right that wrong by restoring a promise that we made to Filipinos that fought side by side with us in World War II. We promised them in no uncertain terms that they would enjoy the same veterans' benefits that others received for putting their lives at risk. More than 200,000 Filipinos fought in defense of the United States in the Pacific Theater against the Japanese in World War II, and more than half of them were killed. As citizens of a Commonwealth of the United States, and before and during the war, Filipinos were legally American nationals, and they were promised the same benefits afforded to those serving in the United States Armed Forces. But in 1946, Congress passed the Rescission Act, a law that stripped Filipinos of the benefits that had been promised them by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The Rescission Act created a wrong that will not be righted unless our nation restores the veteran status it promised to Filipino soldiers more than 65 years ago. Now, the irony here, Mr. Speaker, is that there were other countries that provided us with men and women who served during World War II, and they were also promised veterans benefits. In fact, there are 65 countries that provided service members to fight alongside of us. Every one of those other soldiers were provided veterans benefits from other countries. And yet the Filipinos, who were part of a commonwealth at the time, who were nationals of this country, who were promised veteran benefits, were denied them by the Rescission Act that was passed in 1946. What this amendment does is make all Filipino veterans fully eligible for veterans benefits similar to those received by U.S. veterans. Specifically, the amendment eliminates the distinction between regular or old Filipino scouts and the other three groups of veterans: Commonwealth Army of the Philippines, Recognized Guerrilla Forces, and New Filipino Scouts. Veterans that have received lump sum payments would be eligible for these benefits. Now, we tried to sort of cover this all up by giving them a $15,000 stipend. Frankly, that's not good enough. And there are still about 15,000 living Filipino veterans of World War II right now. They're 85 years old. They're not going to live much longer. But they certainly deserve the benefits that we promised them, but that we then rescinded with the Rescission Act of 1946. For these veterans and their families, I believe the time has come to right this horrific wrong. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. Does the gentleman insist on his point of order?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I make a point of order against the amendment because it proposes to change existing statutory law and constitutes legislation in an appropriations bill and therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21, because that rule states in pertinent part, Mr. Chairman, that an amendment to a general appropriations bill shall not be in order if it changes existing law, that the amendment directly, and in this case, the amendment directly amends existing law, and I would ask for a ruling from the Chair.
Does any member wish to be heard on the point of order? If not, the Chair will rule, and the Chair finds that the amendment proposes directly to change existing law, to wit, Title 38, Section 107, As such, it does constitute a violation of Clause 2C of Rule 21, and the point of order is sustained. The clerk will read.
Page 66, line 5, spending reduction account, section 518. The amount by which the applicable allocation of new budget authority made by the committee exceeds the amount of proposed new budget authority is $0.
What purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will read.
Amendment offered by Mr. Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available in this act may be used to enter into a contract using procedures that do not give to small business concerns owned and controlled by veterans, as that term is defined in Section 3Q3 of the Small Business Act, 15 U.S.C. 632Q3, that are included in the database under Section 8127F of Title 38 United States Code, and preference available with respect to such contract, except for a preference given to small business concerns owned and controlled by service-disabled veterans, as the term is defined in Section 3Q2 of the Small Business Act, 15 U.S.C. 632Q2.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise this evening to offer an amendment that levels the playing field and promotes fairness for veterans when it comes to contracting with the federal government. According to the most recent census, there are almost 22 million veterans living in the United States, and over 2.4 million of them now manage their own company. Providing opportunities for veteran-owned small businesses, I believe, utilizes the talents and training of our nation's heroes and can help end epidemic levels of veteran unemployment. Unfortunately, not all of our servicemen and women have found opportunities upon their return home. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has reported that unemployment rate among veterans, including those returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, was at a staggering 21.9%. These numbers are unacceptable. These brave men and women who have served our country deserve every effort from this body to give them the tools they need to provide for themselves and for their families. It should be the explicit policy of this Congress and all government agencies to support our veterans and our veteran entrepreneurs. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, the amendment I'm again offering to the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Appropriations Act would give veteran-owned small businesses the preference for contracts equal to that of any group eligible for a preferred consideration, except for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. The practice of the federal government providing preferences to encourage government to do business with certain groups is very well established. This amendment does not look to restrict or change the current preference process. It merely serves to level the playing field for our veterans. This amendment would also preserve the current policy of giving greater preference to service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. This exact same amendment was unanimously passed in the last year's Veterans Affairs Military Construction Affairs Act. It was signed into law as part of last year's budget process. As our nation continues to emerge from this great recession, we need to create an economic climate that encourages innovation and also rewards hard work. By serving this great nation nobly, often in far-off and dangerous locations, our nation's veterans have displayed exceptional determination and leadership skills. Character traits like these are paramount for long-term economic prosperity and for private sector success. I and many of my colleagues have made a commitment to our constituents and to the American people to do everything possible to create jobs and to do everything possible to help returning veterans. The self-discipline and innovation of our veterans could lead our economic recovery. Ultimately, this amendment would give our veterans a level playing field to help spur economic growth and help spur job creation. With many servicemen and women returning home from their combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and nearly a quarter of veterans saying that they're interested in starting or buying their own small businesses, we need to preserve accountability of these contract programs. In order to do so, We define small businesses by using the current definition outlined by the Small Business Administration, and eligible businesses must be registered with the Department of Veteran Affairs, where the VA Center for Veteran Enterprises maintains a database of certified and registered veteran-owned businesses. In addition, this amendment would apply to all federal contracts authorized by this Act and would be applied to any portion of state or local projects receiving federal funds. In many cases, this law will simply be reinforcing existing practices and ensuring that this will continue to be the policy. Let this Congress once again bring fairness to the government contracting system and ensure that our veterans who put their lives on the line and their lives on hold to defend our freedoms make sure that they're receiving the same preferential contracting status that this Congress has given to others. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I urge my colleagues to support this important amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, veteran-owned companies do two really important things. First, they create jobs and provide positive impact on our economy, and most importantly, veteran-owned small businesses provide a great venue for unemployed veterans to find work. Mr. Chairman, I believe that the government has done poorly in reaching the 3% contracting goal for veterans. For example, agencies' contract awards were below 1% from 2003 to 2006. The most recent figures for 2009 show agencies awarded only 1.98% to service-disabled veterans. Agencies need to do better, and I believe this amendment will help the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs do a better job. I support this amendment, and I urge its adoption. Be delighted to yield.
I want to join in supporting this amendment, commend the gentleman from Pennsylvania for his hard work on this effort, and I hope we can adopt this amendment unanimously. And I appreciate the gentleman yielding. I yield back.
We're pleased to accept the gentleman's amendment. We accepted last year, and we're proud to accept it this year to help encourage the VA to look to veteran-owned businesses.
The question is on the amendment. Will all those in favor say aye? All those opposed say no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
He's got two different ones.
It's marked number 4. 4 new, I think, is specific.
Amendment offered by Mr. Poe of Texas. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this Act may be used to prohibit a veteran service organization that is participating in the funeral or memorial service of a veteran from reciting any words as part of such service or memorial.
Mr. Chairman, that's number 5.
Clerk will designate the other amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Poe of Texas. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this Act may be used to hire a director of a national cemetery who is not a veteran.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, during the hot days of last summer, the veterans of foreign wars went to battle with the Veterans Administration in Houston, Texas. The VFW claimed the Veterans Administration was censoring free speech and preventing the free exercise of religion at the National Cemetery in Houston. I appreciate the Chairman, Mr. Culberson's work on this project after the Veterans Administration notified, or the Veterans of Foreign Wars notified not only me, but notified him as well. The result is this. This cemetery, Mr. Chairman, is the second largest in the nation. It's a place where 4 Medal of Honor recipients are buried. The VFW said that the chapel at the cemetery would be closed, and it was closed. The Bible, the cross, and the Star of David were removed by the Veterans Administration, and the chapel became a storage shed. VFW members also said that the director of the cemetery censored the prayers and prohibited the religious ceremony during the burial of America's veterans. The VFW had to sue the Veterans Administration, and the Veterans Administration naturally denied the whole thing. But recently, a federal judge in Texas approved and agreed to an order requiring the chapel to be reopened, the Bible, the cross, the Star of David to be returned to their proper places, and said that the Veterans Administration must not interfere with free speech or the free exercise of religion at burials of America's war veterans. Mr. Chairman, it's ironic that Americans have gone to war all over the world, fought for the principles of the U.S. Constitution. Then they come home, they face a government hostility and the denial of the First Amendment rights to the citizens when these veterans are buried in VA cemeteries. Now the veterans have won a battle against the government that wanted to deny them the American freedoms they fought for in lands. I will not.
The gentleman offered one amendment and reading another.